Hi, I'm Chris Lee, and this is Virtually Speaking. Joining us today is Josh Linkner, a well-known thought leader and two-time New York Times bestselling author of Disciplined Dreaming, The Road to Reinvention, Hacking Innovation, and his latest 2021 title, Big Little Breakthroughs. He's a five-time tech entrepreneur, serving as founder and CEO of each, driving a combined exit value of over $250 million. One of his well-known ventures was as founder and CEO and chairman of ePrize, the largest interactive promotion agency in the world. He's the founding partner of Detroit Venture Partners, helping to rebuild his hometown of Detroit, Michigan. He's a weekly contributor to Inc. magazine, Forbes, Detroit Free Press, and has been featured by many more international media. Josh has received high praise from people like Magic Johnson, Seth Godin, Steve Case, and from the chairmen of companies like US Bancorp and Groupon. He moves audiences to action with practical and effective approaches to driving better business outcomes via creativity, innovation, reinvention, and hypergrowth leadership. Josh is also a professional jazz guitarist, so he was meant to create and improvise. Please join me now with Josh Linkner. Well, hello, Josh Linkner. Thank you for joining me here on Virtually Speaking. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with a fellow musician. I'm happy to chat today.
Yeah, it's always fun talking to you. Of course, we're both musicians, which is cool and kind of brings us right into the topic of creativity and innovation and collaboration and thinking on your feet. And of course, you've been very successful in your career, not only just in the speaking world. Of course, you're very well known and multiple best-selling author and New York Times best-selling author. Of course, your latest book is great, Big Little Breakthroughs, which we definitely will get into. But even before you were a speaker, tell us about your incredible success you had as an entrepreneur.
Well, very nice of you to say thanks, and I'm grateful for what's happened so far. But yeah, so I started my career as a jazz guitarist, as we discussed. I've been playing for over 40 years. Put myself through college playing music. I still play in jazz clubs around the world wherever I can, and I love the art form. But at age 20, I started a tech company. And that might sound really weird. I'd actually never taken a business class, but I learned so much about business from jazz that, you figure things out, you course correct, you adapt, you sort of improvise in real time. And I had a background a little bit as a tech nerd in the early 80s, and it all coalesced. So in 1990, I started a tech company, and fast forward over the next 30 years, I started, built, and sold five tech companies, exit value of over $200 million. We created about 10,000 jobs in the process. So, a good run, and really had a lot of fun in the building and scaling of these companies. I then went on to start a venture capital fund here in my hometown of Detroit. My partners and I just care deeply about our beloved soul-based hometown that has struggled so long. So we started investing in tech startups, not manufacturing, tech startups here in Detroit, with the notion of helping to rebuild our troubled city. We said, maybe we'll make some money. More importantly, maybe we can make a difference. So with that work and a lot of board work and support, I've helped over 100 startups get off the ground. And I just, it's funny, man, I just still play jazz. Like, I used to play jazz with instruments. Then I started playing jazz when building companies, different instruments. I write books, but that's using words instead of musical notes. And I just view myself primarily as a jazz musician that has had a fun time playing around in business.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about what does that mean for to be playing jazz in business? Obviously, when you start a company, you're kind of ad-libbing and but listening really well and collaborating and making other people sound good and look good. So there's a lot of all of that going on. But what's your definition of playing jazz in business and really what's your secret to success? I know that the main word I will say for you is innovation. I mean, you're definitely somebody who loves to talk about that and how to think differently and just really, this is such a topic that you hear so many people talk about. There's only a few speakers who really are the best at it in the world, and you're definitely one of them. And I'm just curious, how do you look at all of that? And it sounds like you start with thinking about it from the jazz musician point of view.
Yeah, so I know there are people that don't love listening to jazz. It's maybe an acquired taste, but it is a beautiful art form because it's the one art form where you were spontaneously composing and performing. It's like real-time innovation. And a jazz combo, and you know this, but maybe some listeners don't, there's generally small groups and it's very collaborative. So like you and I didn't script out our session today. We're kind of riffing off of each other. We're listening, we're sharing, we're building off of each other's ideas. That's really what jazz is all about. And so with only 1% of the notes on the written page, the rest you improvise as you go, it's really kind of this dangerous, cool art form. And every night is different. And you're taking responsible risks and you have to perform at your best, even though the notes are not in front of you. And so when I look at the modern business world, I think that is exactly what we're doing, not just in startups, but in big companies too. In the past, maybe the metaphor was that of a symphony conductor. One person, the CEO, like standing in the center of the stage and not even playing an instrument anymore. And that whole gig was about precision and accuracy and alignment. But today, the world is too turbulent. It's moving too fast, too much technological change, too much ambiguity. And I think that leaders today really need to play jazz. And that has really worked very well for me on the business front as well.
Absolutely. And your latest book, Big Little Breakthroughs, is really about innovation. And it's obviously about having breakthroughs, and something that I think a lot of people are going to be looking for now as we come out of this pandemic and we look at the new world and we look at the future as far as what can our companies do to lead in this world and partake in this world and navigate through this new world of a lot of technologies and new ways of communicating. So is that what the book's really all about?
Yeah, so thanks for bringing it up. So the new book is Big Little Breakthroughs, How Small Everyday Innovations Drive Oversized Results. And it is about those things, but it's a flipped upside down viewpoint on it. So most of us think of innovation as like these giant breakthroughs, like, billion-dollar ideas, moonshots. But to me, that is out of reach of most of us, and it's wildly risky. So Big Little Breakthroughs is the opposite. It's cultivating small daily acts of creativity. Think of them as micro innovations. And these little teeny baby innovations, baby breakthroughs, are way less risky. They're way more accessible. We all can be everyday innovators. We don't have to only be for the CEO or someone wearing a lab coat. And we're building critical skill. And those little wins add up to big wins. So it's a very pragmatic approach, helping everyday people, leaders, people across an entire organization build and cultivate their creativity. And just real quickly, in the research for this book, I'm very proud of it. Like, I do feel it was a piece of art. I'm no, celebrity author or anything, but I'm proud of it for a guy like me. But I spent over 1,000 hours in research on this one. I did neuroscience research, academic research, business research, but I also personally interviewed hundreds of people. I interviewed CEOs, billionaires, celebrity entrepreneurs, musicians, and tried to decode what are the habits, mindsets, and tactics of the most innovative people. And I said, can we sort of break through the mythical thinking of like, oh, creativity is a lightning bolt from the heavens? Can we actually look at it as a manageable resource that normal business leaders could take and build and cultivate and deploy, not just for the sake of it, but to drive meaningful results?
So if you would share with us one or two of your favorite interviews that you had, what was one of the more remarkable interviews that really kind of blew your mind with somebody special?
So again, I talked to, billionaires and famous people and all that, but I'm going to share one that no one's ever heard of, which I love these like undiscovered ones. So I get in touch with this guy who lives in London. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that in central London, the single biggest environmental challenge is cigarette butt litter, which is a problem in many major cities, LA certainly included. And it's a sort of pesky problem that doesn't go away. They throw a bunch of money at it. Nothing really works. So enter this guy named Trewin Restorick. So Trewin is not a celebrity. He's not a famous guy. He doesn't have 13 PhDs. He doesn't wear $6,000 suits. This guy wears like wrinkly khaki pants and 10-year-old loafers. He's an everyday dude. But he had this idea. He's like, I care about the environment and I'm sick and tired of seeing these cigarette butts. I'll tinker and see if I can come up with an idea. So he invents something called the ballot bin, which goes like this. Let's say you and I were having a fish and chips at a pub. We walk out in the street. We're about to throw our cigarette butts on the ground until we see in the distance this bright yellow metal box mounted on a pole. So as we get closer, the front of it is glass. And at the top, it's asking a two-part question, like, which is your favorite food, hamburgers or pizza? And there's a little receptacle under each. It's encouraging smokers to vote with their butts. So you put your cigarette butt, like I like pizza, I'd put it under pizza, and there's a divider. So it falls on top of the other cigarette butts that you can see. It's almost like two bar charts made out of cigarette butts. And The thing is, it's simple and it was low tech and it didn't require millions of dollars or government approval. But you know what? It worked. And when these ballot bins are installed, they reduce cigarette litter by 80%.
Wow.
So Trellin has now started a company. He's in 27 countries around the world. He's rocking it out. And the thing I love about that is this, Chris. Like if I look at Elon Musk, I say good for Elon Musk, but it's hard to see ourselves in that. Yet when I look at Trellin Restorick, I say, I could have come up with that. You and me, we could have come up with that. And to me, that's what Big Little Breakthroughs is all about. It's finding accessible ways that normal people don't have to be wearing a lab coat, that can come up with amazing ideas that can truly make a difference.
So, do you find that I know you've spoken all over the world, you've spoken hundreds and hundreds of times. Um, do you find that people are more intimidated than they'll let on about technology? I mean, it seems like a lot of speakers are talking about technology, and all the articles are about technology and how we can embrace it and everything. But do you think that people are still resisting it and are kind of afraid and feel like, ah, that's for the next generation and we'll just kind of stick it out doing the way we've been doing things? Or do you see everyone really embracing everything in business the way they kind of should be now that they kind of have to?
I think that in technology in general can be intimidating. And very often, if people have enjoyed success along their career, they're resistant to change because they're basing their decisions on historical reference. That would be great if we lived in a vacuum, of course, but today we're living in a rate of change like none other in history. So I don't know that that's prudent. Although, by the way, I'm intimidated by technology sometimes too. It can be very intimidating. My philosophy as a speaker, and I'd be curious, to get your perspective, because you're obviously been in this business a long time and really one of the best and most respected folks in our field. But I find that too often when speakers show up, they think it's all about them. And they talk down to their audience and they use language that's inaccessible. And the whole message is, look at me, look how smart I am. And I think that's wrong. They got it backwards. A great speech is not about the speaker, it's about the audience. And it's not look what I did, it's look what you can do. And so I think it's an act of service and generosity to give a keynote, and ideally one that's crafted specifically for the needs of that particular audience, not a recite your lines kind of, canned speech. And that it's connecting, it's helping to uplift people in a way that's authentic and real. And it's sharing things that are going to make them feel like, gosh, I got this. I can do this, as opposed to saying, oh man, I need to, but I could never do that. And that's one of my big pet peeves about our industry. For me, my strategy is pretty simple. I say, and again, I love your perspective, Chris. I came out of a technology background. Like I built tech companies, and in tech companies, we measure stuff. So I started thinking a while ago, how would you measure a keynote? Like what would the key metrics be of a successful keynote? And I came up with two. I mean, there are probably others, but the two that I came up with are number one, after the event, after the session, is there buzz? Like, are people energized? Are they fired up? Are they inspired? Are they calling their spouse? Are they talking about it at the cocktail hour? And that's like sort of a visceral thing. It's driven by entertainment value and inspiration and great storytelling and humor and all that. But if that's all the keynote delivers, I think it's falling flat, because all you've done at that point is driven entertainment value. To me, the second and perhaps even more important metric is, what does it look like 6 months later?
Mm-hmm.
Are people still using language that they learned? Have you effectuated change? Are people making different choices or decisions? Have they enjoyed some type of real result? Have they adapted their approach to their business or life? And so to me, it's like, how do you optimize those two metrics? How do you be energizing and inspiring, and at the same time, sort of practical and drive meaningful results as a direct, output of the speech?
I love that. And I know you have a couple of your own catchphrases and language that you like to leave behind. So why don't you share with us one of those right now? Maybe your top one that recently you've been using a lot.
I probably think we all have our catchphrases. I mean, I mean, it's not really a catchphrase, but I feel like I'm on this mission to help everyday people become everyday innovators. And I suppose it's a catchphrase, but I feel like innovation shouldn't be some members only club where they stopped accepting applications. Like, it should be for all of us. So I'm really passionate about that. If there's a big company and they say, oh, the creatives, they sit up on the second floor, that breaks my heart a little. Like, how come it's not everybody is the creatives? So that's one little catchphrase. I think the other one that I've said often, and I hate to say it as a catchphrase, but I've observed this, that, in 30 years in business, I've seen that too often people are they overestimate the risk of trying something new, but they sort of underestimate the risk of standing still. And I really think that there's a risk in that, that we have a responsibility, even when things are going okay, instead of like that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it nonsense, that we should examine what is working and say, okay, should we optimize it? Should we tweak it? Should we reinvent it? Should we rethink it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you have another one that I was actually thinking of, which is a moment where somebody does something that is transformative and they think differently. And I remember you were telling a story in one of your speeches about the guy in New York who created the tour bus and faced all the windows, all the seats towards the window, and like a stadium seating scenario. What did you call that?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly right. And he took an opposite approach. So every tour bus in the world, seats face forward. This guy faced them sideways, created a big panoramic set of glass. So everybody had an unobstructed view.
Right.
And what I call that is actually it's a technique. And the technique is called a judo flip. The
Okay.
judo flip, as I see it, is basically like this. If let's say you're trying to solve a problem or seize an opportunity, first start by taking an inventory. What have you always done in the past? What does traditional wisdom suggest? What do others in your field do? What's the most obvious way to solve this problem? Then you draw a line down the page and just simply ask, what's the polar opposite? What would it look like if you judo flipped it? And so when you judo flip, you're challenging yourself to, instead of putting your seats facing forward, like let's go sideways. And
Right.
there's many, many examples in business and life where people have enjoyed remarkable success, not by doing what you've always done and like trying harder or working longer hours or doing things faster, but rather by doing it different. And by judo flipping, it's a very kind of fun, memorable way of thinking about, trying the oppositional approach instead of the obvious one.
Absolutely. So you wrote a few other books as well. Tell me about, I know the new book's always a favorite book, but what was the book that did the best of the other three, and that really you think is still relevant today?
Yeah, well, my first book was called Disciplined Dreaming, a
Hmm.
proven system to drive breakthrough creativity. And it really establishes like this 5-step process on how do you, if you're trying to tackle a problem, what do you do? And it starts by examining the problem, and there's sort of like a way to you kind of carefully understand the parameters and what's going on. Then you sort of go hunting for ingredients and sort of like this hunter gatherer mode. And it's just like a very deliberate process to help people unlock creativity.
And is that
That
what
that
you?
was the one that did the best. I mean, that was New York Times bestseller. It's printed in I think 16 languages,
Yeah,
and it's still doing pretty well.
right. That's disciplined dreaming. So, is that what you were doing in your tech companies? I mean, is that probably based on your own experience of what worked for you, or was it also based on research with a lot of other people's input?
It was both. I mean, anytime there are different people who write different ways, and I have respect for everybody. All I can do is share my own. But I've written every word of every book I've written. I don't have a writing partner or anything, and I have some help with research, but I do a lot of my own research as well. Every interview I do myself, that kind of thing. And so for Disciplined Dreaming and my other books, there certainly are some personal references, but it's not a like it's not a biography on me. I mean,
Right.
I'm an okay guy, but I'm not an interesting subject compared to the people that I study. So I sort of travel the world in research and learning stories of others and try to weave it all together in a meaningful way to make a point. So I'm definitely not the protagonist in most of my books. I appear as a supporting character from time to time.
Nice. Yeah. So, in business, going back even further, what was the moment where you kind of hit that home run, and what was the process that got you there, and what was that?
Well, businesses are to a degree like books and kids. It's hard to choose your favorite and all that. And
Right.
I've had a lot of failures, but I've like screwed so many things up. I wouldn't have enough time to tell you all the bad decisions I made, but I've had some successes. And probably it was the company that I built that was the largest was called ePrize. We were sort of like half ad agency and half software company.
Mm.
We designed, built, and ran digital promotions for large brand advertisers like Coca-Cola and Procter and Gamble and Nike and Microsoft. And I grew the company to about $100 million in revenue before we sold it. We worked with 74 of the top 100 brands. We had offices in not only Detroit, but Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Dallas, New York, London. And so, it was a sizable
Yeah.
business. But a lot of what we did is my philosophy back to jazz. I think we played a lot of jazz. So when I started that business in 1999, most people were focused on internet advertising. That was all the rage.
Right.
And I could have done that too. And I would have been like the 700th internet advertising company. But I just took a step back and said, promotion is a large category of the marketing mix, but it was largely dormant online. It was like this old school, good old boy world. And so I said, if everyone else is doing internet advertising, how about instead I become the first internet promotion company? So right out of the gate, I took this oppositional judo flip kind of approach and decided to pursue it in a different manner. And that was our philosophy all along. You know, we had a lot of struggles and setbacks, like when the stock market crashed in 2000, when the dot-com bubble burst. You know, we were going after pets.com, and all of a sudden we're like, well, yeah, we better go after a big company that can afford to pay their bills. And that was a difficult pivot. You know, so the economic crisis of 2008 was a difficult pivot. But I think we stayed hungry. We had a lot of grit and hustle, a lot of like sort of Detroit hustles harder kind of love.
Mm-hmm.
And but we applied creativity at every step of the way, and I'm very grateful. But I'll tell you, like the biggest success isn't a personal one. I think it's the impact that I've had in other people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, I just remember, you know, look, I've had some financial wins and I'm very proud of that. I'm grateful and all, but you know, one time a woman came in my office. She's like, hey, you probably don't even know who I am. I got a job here a couple of years ago. I'm a software engineer and I just want to come and say thank you. I'm like, why are you thanking me? You know, she's like, well, I just closed on a house and my husband and I are now the first homeowners in either of our extended families. And so she started going on, help break a cycle of poverty and all this stuff. And like, and by the way, it's her success, not mine. I mean, I was the one grateful to her, but knowing that you played a small hand in that is so intrinsically rewarding. There's another company I invested in. Guy comes and visits me. His name is Greg Schwartz, this sweet, humble, sincere, kind, smart guy. And he shares his idea. And frankly, it wasn't all that great. But I was like, listen, I love you. Would you be open-minded? Could you come back and maybe we'll do some whiteboarding sessions? Let's figure this out together. So he's like, oh my God, absolutely. No ego at all. Comes back in. We ended up investing in his company and it gets going. And like many things, it's not a straight line and it struggled a bit and it didn't turn out the way he'd hoped. But again, a little creative pivoting and he then renamed it and repivoted it. Anyway, long story short, today that company is called StockX. StockX is the global leader in marketplace for things like shoes and collectibles and things. And the company recently raised capital now. I'm long, you know, not an investor anymore, but raised capital now at a $3.8 billion valuation. Wow. We invested in that company when it was worth $3 million. So again, I'm not taking credit, by the way. That's Greg and his amazing, humble leadership style and that company's success. But just knowing that you played a small role in something like that is just that's more intrinsically rewarding for me than any particular, you know, winning an award for my whatever. That's the juice for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we, like I mentioned, as we get through this change of the world that we're going through right now, and things are starting to get back to normal, although I think it's a different world, it's a different normal for sure for all of us. What areas do you think are the most interesting and are you the most excited about in business, and where people could really take advantage of their own creativity and innovation and apply that?
Well, I think that creative problem solving and inventive thinking are these super powerful, underutilized assets. And they can be directed in a lot of different ways. We obviously know about directing them to come up with a new product idea, but we can direct those to come up with better safety precautions in a factory, or you know, to improve throughput in a production facility. You know, so I think that we can apply creativity in a lot of ways to drive meaningful results and growth, especially as the world is changing coming out of COVID. I look at it like this, Chris, if you in your backyard there in LA, you learn that there was an oil well and you own the rights to it, and there's $1 billion of oil sitting there, you probably wouldn't be, yeah, no thanks. I don't have enough time. You'd be like, yeah, like I'm going to tap that asset for sure. And I believe that many companies have something similar, and it's not an oil well, but it's the creative reservoir of their team that is underutilized, that's just sitting there waiting to be tapped. And if we can do that, it's a win for the organization because it can drive progress, and it's a win for those people because it's such intrinsically rewarding activity of expressing creativity to solve problems. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about that. You know, when you look at so many of the advantages of the past have become now commoditized and outsourced and automated, the one field that can't be is creativity, the way we solve client needs, the way we grow our team, the way we win, the way we, you know, and so that's what I'm excited about, is that in this sort of new era of business, it's the perfect time to double down on as leaders, you know, creating organizations that foster and support creative abilities, not for the sake of it, not to draw on the walls with purple crayons, but to drive meaningful results.
Right. But don't you think that some of the people out there that are working really hard at their jobs are less creative than others, and like all the people you interviewed are just super creative, creative geniuses, and they've really always kind of had that knack or had that ability. Is it really something that you can teach and something you can learn, or something that people like you can really inspire?
Yeah, I don't believe that at all, actually. Nor does the research. So the research is pretty clear that all human beings are built to be creative. That's our natural state. Like we are hardwired to be creative. Now that can look different ways. So I play jazz guitar. I can't draw a stick figure if I tried. And like, so there are things that I know there's my creativity is good in some areas, not in others.
Right.
So just because someone doesn't know how to paint on a canvas doesn't mean they can't be creative. So I think if you're running a dental practice, you can be creative. If you run the customer service team, be creative. If you're in finance, you should be creative for sure. Doesn't mean you should be illegal, of course not, but you should be able to, interpret the data differently and formulate reports so that people can make better decisions. I think there's room for creativity in every role in every company. And as human beings, again, we are built this way.
Right.
So I always like to say that creativity is like your weight, not your height. So I'm a pretty short guy, and try as I may, I'm not going to grow a foot by next month. But my weight I can control based on my nutrition and exercise
Right.
and all that. And so creativity is exactly like that. Every one of us, me included, can build more creative muscle. You can build creative skill and capacity, which in turn, I believe, is the highest leverage activity we can do because it drives the biggest outcomes that we seek.
So how does somebody start? Are there steps? Do you have like a plan, like a 1, 2, 3 plan? Or have you heard anything that's been working for people who say, come back to you later and say, man, I wasn't really using my creative juices. I wasn't really doing it. But now I'm super creative because I changed this. I pivoted this way.
One of the greatest gifts that I get every day, and one of the main reasons I do this is I hear that all the time. There's almost not a day that goes by I'm not getting a call or a text or an email. Hey, Josh, I can't believe it. We just had this board meeting. We crushed it. We solved the problem. We would have never done it otherwise. Again, I'm not trying to take credit, but I know firsthand that even the grumpiest people with their arms folded can absolutely become more creative and in turn drive real results. So how do you do it? And so in the book, I cover how to do it, but I cover, first of all, there's 8 core mindsets of innovators that I've discovered across interviews and studying creativity. Right. And most of them are counterintuitive. They're the opposite of what we've been taught.
Ooh, I like that.
So there's mindsets, there's habits. So I study in the book the habits of famous people like Lady Gaga and Lin-Manuel Miranda and other amazing Banksy, the artist Banksy.
You got to meet with Banksy?
I did not get to meet with Banksy, although I covered some of his approaches.
But you met with the other people.
I met with many of the people, and other people I was able to research without having a face-to-face with them.
Got it.
But I also then cover tactics. And one of the things that we can do is we can upgrade, obviously, our mindsets and our habits, but even our tactics. And that I'll give you an example if you'd like, Chris, but there's a very simple tactical shift that we can make that will boost creativity. Like you could do this today.
Let's do it.
So we all, most often, when we're looking for ideas, we brainstorm. But brainstorming is an awful technique. It's out of date. It was invented in 1958. It basically yields mediocre ideas. And the reason is because fear creeps into the room. Turns out that fear, not natural talent, fear is the single biggest blocker of creative output. And we've all done it. You're in a meeting, instead of sharing your cool, crazy idea, you hold it back because you don't want to get laughed at or look foolish. So if we change our techniques, we can very quickly elevate our creativity. So in the book, I actually cover 13 techniques, but one of my favorites is called role storming, R-O-L-E. Role storming is brainstorming, but in character. So you're brainstorming as if you are somebody else. So you now bear no responsibility. You're liberated. You can say anything you want, no fear of retribution. And so as a quick example, I did this with a group of executives one time at Sony Japan. And I met this guy who was like the stiffest human being I've ever met. Dark suit, white shirt, his tie is strangling him. Right. Anyway, we got this guy role storming as Yoda. I've never seen personal transformation like this. This dude's jacket's off, his tie's undone, he's leaping around the room, and the whiteboards were filled with ideas. Wow. And the thing is, I didn't teach him to be creative. He had that all along, as does everybody, as do we all. But he was in a role that forbid it. We put him in a new role and the magic happened. So the technique is actually really simple. Everybody in the room takes on an actual real world problem. It's not like a goofy thing. Take on an actual challenge that you have. But each person chooses a character. You could be a movie star. You could be a supermodel. You could be a villain. You could be a hero. You could be a literary figure. You could be a 6-year-old. You could be an alien from 100 years in the future. And you have to stay in character, pretending that you are that person solving the problem. And I'm telling you, man, the results are breathtaking.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna have to try that sometime. But I'm gonna stick to celebrities or actors probably rather than a one of my. I don't know about the drummers. Plus, you kind of have to know the character really well. You have to kind of know the mannerisms and the accent and the personality a little bit, right? The more you know, the better. Because that
Oh,
guy
we've done
must have
so
been
many.
a fan. That guy must have been a fan of Star Wars because he nailed it with Yoda, right?
He was, yeah, exactly. And it could be anyone that you admire. It could be someone you hate. Again, I've seen great role storm sessions where people are playing the villain and they obviously come up with these evil, maniacal ideas, but there might be some kernel in there. They're not going to
Right.
do something bad, but there's a kernel in there that they wouldn't have ordinarily landed on. And
Love it.
so, yeah, I've seen people be, Kim Kardashian and Hemingway and Oprah and President Obama and President Trump and like you name it. I've seen people do it. And it's just the coolest thing ever because people who would ordinarily, are somewhat subdued, they just come to life and these ideas start to flow.
Absolutely. That's cool. I love that. So as we kind of get towards the end of our discussion, and I look towards the future with you, I'm wondering if you're bullish on the future, you're bullish on creativity, and if you think that there's kind of an opportunity here for people, maybe better than ever in anybody's lives, to be creative and to be innovative and to be, totally trying to change the way they're looking at themselves and the way they're looking at the companies that they run or that they work for. Is this really a pivotal moment, and why is that?
Well, I am really bullish actually, and not just out of feigned optimism. I see, I'm an avid reader. I'm studying stuff all the time, and I'm optimistic because yes, we are living in turbulent times, but turbulent times creates new opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I feel like the entire world with COVID has hit a giant reset button, and
Yeah.
people's patterns are broken. So the way we sell, the way we lead, the way we shop, the way we laugh, the way we love, and there's an old saying that when patterns are broken, new worlds emerge. And certainly, I think it's taught us that we can't simply rely on the models of the past and expect the same results. But at the same time, it's opening up just wild, cool new opportunities for us individually, organizationally, even in our communities that didn't exist in the past. And so I think that we have, we've democratized many of the things that kept people down. We all have access to information. Bandwidth is cheap. It's cheap to start companies these days. I think there's so many wonderful things going on in our world, despite the challenges, which are real, to be clear, that the combination of challenge and turbulence unlocks opportunity. And I really do believe this is the era of creativity. In other words, maybe in the past, we had to learn other skills, and that's what got us ahead in business and such. But today, it's exactly the opposite. In fact, the World Economic Forum recently released their Future of Jobs report. They interviewed hundreds of leaders around the world. What are the most important job skills needed in the future of work? And they identified that 4 of the top 5 tied to human creativity. There are things like originality and initiative and creative problem solving. So I think that the hard skills of the past have become commoditized, and these softer skills are the things that lead us forward. I've seen it firsthand that each of us can develop the skills, we can dust off the cobwebs and go after it. So yeah, I'm really optimistic, but in a sort of confident, realistic manner, not just in a pie in the sky manner.
Right, right. And absolutely, people can find that out a little bit, get inspired by that, and get some tools and some ideas out of the new book. When did the book come out, Big Little Breakthroughs?
Came out April 20th. It was 420 for anyone who likes that date. I was hoping that would be a smoking success.
And that was this year?
This year.
Wow, that's awesome. So that's great. Good luck to you with that book. I'm sure it's going to just continue to rise and spread around the world like your other ones have. And thank you so much, Josh, for coming on with me. This has been a really interesting conversation. You're a really awesome guy with a lot of great ideas, an incredibly talented speaker who I've always enjoyed watching and selling. And I look forward to talking to you again soon with, lots of new positivity and outlooks and breakthroughs.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership. And it's a pleasure to hang out with you. And I can't wait to not only work together more, but also get to play some music together. So thanks again. It's really an honor to be with you.
Absolutely, my friend. Have a good one. Good rest of the week. And I will talk to you soon.
Cheers.